Hi there, this is Sharon Martin. So last week I asked my Facebook page for some questions that they'd like to have me answer for them over video. So I am slowly working through that list and making some videos. So this one is going to focus on a question that asked, what are some practical exercises that I can do to overcome perfectionism? So I actually wrote a whole book of practical exercises. So there's lots more in here, but I'm going to pull out a couple of them for you today to just get you started. So before we kind of tackle the what do you do, let me just give you a really quick overview of what it is we're trying to undo by understanding sort of what some of those roots of perfectionism are. So one of the big pieces of perfectionism is that we set impossibly high standards for ourselves. These are expectations that are unrealistic, right? Obviously, the expectation of doing something perfectly, never making a mistake, always having the right answer, always knowing what to do, being able to do everything and to be able to do everything well. Those are not things that we can actually accomplish, right? We can work and work and work, and as perfectionists, we tend to do that, always striving for the next achievement, the next, sign of validation that we're doing it all and doing it well. But because we're expecting this perfection for ourselves, we end up always feeling like we're not good enough. So we end up on the opposite end of the spectrum, of feeling we're always falling short no matter how hard we try. And like I said, that is because we've basically set ourselves up for failure from the get-go by, asking ourselves to do the impossible. So as we think about that, there are a couple of things that we can do, both with our behavior and with our thinking. And as you hear me talk about this, you're probably going to notice that so much of this is in our heads. This is a problem of the way that we are thinking about things. So the first exercise is really just what I would call doing something imperfectly. So intentionally forcing yourself to make a mistake, leave something undone, to do something that has some flaws in it. So I would suggest starting with something that is pretty, that's pretty low stakes. So we don't want to start with something that's super important. We want to start with something that has minimal consequences. But I will also say that, most of the things that we're trying to do perfectly, there's really nothing terrible that's going to happen if we do them imperfectly. There are very few things in life that actually need real pinpoint precision. So even though you're going to feel uncomfortable by doing something imperfectly or not doing it at all or doing it part way, the world is not going to end. You're not going to get fired. Everyone is not going to hate you. Probably what's going to happen is, like I said, you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel anxious about it. You may feel self-critical. And this is the truth, is we're generally our own worst enemies. We are, more critical of ourselves than other people are for the most part. So like I said, recognize that it's going to internally feel bad for you, but it gets easier. The more you do something, the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. So that's why I'm asking you to intentionally do something that's not going to feel good. But start with something small. It could be leaving some dirty dishes in the sink overnight, or maybe it's that you're going to not spell check the email. You're going to leave some mistakes in it and send it anyway. Like I said, probably nothing terrible is going to happen. But what I want you to do is notice, what feelings come up for you when you do this, and practice tolerating that uncomfortable feeling, and thinking about, well, what could I do with those uncomfortable feelings instead of perfecting, doing, right? Can I just sit with them? Can I allow those feelings to be there? Maybe you can find something else to do. Maybe that's, you're going to go for a walk or talk to a friend, something that's sort of a healthy way to cope with some of that. Maybe you journal some of those feelings. Those are a few ideas. So we keep doing these things over and over again, and they start to get easier and more comfortable. And also, I think with any of these things, when we're asking ourselves to do something that's challenging, we want to think about, well, why am I doing this? Like, why am I intentionally making myself uncomfortable? Right, we got to remind ourselves that the whole point is, like, if I could actually not be uncomfortable doing things imperfectly, my life would be improved. I would feel less stress. My relationships might be better. Maybe I could, relax and have a little bit more fun. Maybe I'd be a little bit more fun to be around for other people because I wasn't always, so uptight about things or worried about needing to do something or actually getting up and, doing it rather than just sitting and enjoying an experience. Okay, so the other exercise that I want to share with you is one that I call looking for partial successes. And again, this is an exercise that gets at some of the thinking problems that we have as perfectionists. So one of them is that we have what we would call all or nothing thinking. We tend to think of things in terms of like there's only two categories for ourselves. It's either like it's a success or it's a failure, or I'm good or I'm bad. Things like that. And the problem is that since we're generally not living up to this exceptionally high standard, right? It's not 100% perfect. It's not 100% successful. That means we end up putting ourselves in the other category, which is complete failure, completely useless, a terrible person, right? And that's not fair because there's a lot of space in between. And this is where we really want to be living, right? We want to be able to see our strengths, our efforts, the things that we do well, and we can also see where we want to improve. But we don't want to only see one or the other. We want this middle ground. And so when we look for the partial success, that's what we're doing. We're trying to intentionally find that space that helps us remember some of this went well, some of this was good and useful, and some, wasn't the greatest. But that's okay, right? And that's part of that self-talk that we want to have, is to remind ourselves that it's okay for it not to be 100% perfect. So here's an example or a variation of the example that I have in the book. So let's just say if you had set a goal for yourself that you wanted to go to the gym for an hour every day. Well, that's a pretty big goal for most of us. And let's just pretend then that you actually got to the gym twice during the week. You got busy, some other things came up, you didn't get there every day. So your old perfectionist self might say, well, that was a failure. I didn't get to the gym every day, so I didn't meet that goal. And that was worthless. On the other hand, we could choose to look at that differently. And we could say, well, that was a partial success. You got to the gym twice this week. And going to the gym 2 times is certainly better than going no times. So that still had value. That was a good effort. I can feel good about that. And I can still want to do better next time, right? Next week I can try to do more. But as you can see, we're looking for that partial success. But the other element that I'm starting to introduce to you here is the idea of some self-compassion. And so this might be, another exercise that's related, but perhaps a little bit different, is when we are falling into the self-criticism, when we notice that we're speaking harshly, unfairly, getting down on ourselves for little mistakes, imperfections, things that aren't 100% what we wanted them to be. What we want to do is try to shift away from that critical voice to this more compassionate, understanding voice. And often this is the voice that we use with other people. It's the voice we use with our friends or our dear loved ones. When they're having a hard time, we don't yell at them and call them idiots. Usually we are understanding, we're interested in hearing about what's going on. We try to make them feel comfortable and encouraged. And when we can do that for ourselves, just like with other people, it actually leads to more motivation, better outcomes. It's sometimes the opposite of what we think. Sometimes we think that we need this critical voice in order to sort of crack the whip and, make ourselves do more. And if we don't, we're going to, be lazy, or messy or imperfect. But actually, the research is very clear that the opposite is true, is that when we are compassionate with ourselves, we're actually more motivated, we feel better, we're more focused, we end up doing more. And so that's another piece that I encourage you to try to bring in, like I said, especially when you notice that you're being self-critical, is instead to see if there's something that you can say to yourself that's kind and encouraging, accepting of where you are with things, of who you are. It's not easy. I know that. It sounds much easier when I describe it to you, when I tell you, here's what you do. But these are processes that take a lot of work and a lot of effort. And like I have said repeatedly, they make us uncomfortable because, they're not what we're used to doing. So again, bring in that self-compassion piece, when you realize like you're asking yourself to do something really hard when you do any of these exercises. So when you're asking yourself to do things that are hard, you need to take really good care of yourself. You need to be kind to yourself with your words and with your actions. And just sort of be gentle and remind yourself that this is a process. It goes slow, but if you keep at it, you will make progress. Things do get easier, and you will be able to move away from more of the perfectionist ways of thinking and doing into ways that are more compassionate, more self-accepting, that ultimately allow you to be more of who you are and to feel good about that. Okay, well, I hope that was helpful and gave you a few starting exercises for it. And like I said, there's much more in the book if that's something of interest to you. Okay, take care.